Welcome back, ladies, ladies, ladies. This is for you. Have you ever had a yeast infection, whether it be once, a few times, multiple times, or maybe this is plaguing you? If you have, then you know what I'm talking about when I say that they're annoying. That would be my husband shaking the camera, yes. They're annoying, they're irritating, and they're downright hard to get rid of. If that's you or somebody you know of, you're going to want to stay here and watch this because I have an all-natural solution for you. Hi guys, welcome back to Abundant Living with VO. This is Vicki here. Ladies, 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 this is for you. And I know there's going to be a lot of ladies out there who are so going to appreciate this segment. Before we get started, I want to say men. If there are any men and you have accidentally clicked on this video, you are going to probably want to go ahead, hit stop, get out of this, arrow back out of this, because this is not for you. You're more than welcome to come along with us and learn a little bit about this, but I'm speaking specifically to ladies on this. Guys, I have a feeling you don't want to know anything about this, okay? So unless you're specifically listening for a girlfriend or a mother or a spouse, you're going to want to get out of this, okay? And if you're still on here, guys, I've given you plenty of warnings, so I don't want any comments down below in the comments below because guys didn't want to hear this, okay? All right, ladies, so glad you're here because this is such an important topic because so many of us are dealing with this. So, what am I talking about? Have you ever had a yeast infection? Do you tend to get yeast infections on a semi-regular or a very regular basis? For ladies, that's a lot of us. Because did you know that 75% of all women will have a vaginal yeast infection sometime in their life? That's a lot. Did you also know that 80% of all Americans suffer from chronic candida? And this is a reason why I say that most women, especially in the US, in this country, will suffer from some type of a yeast infection or suffer from a yeast infection at one point in time in their life or another, because 80% or more of Americans, and that includes men and women, deal with some type of candida. So what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about why this is, what it is. As you can see up here, we're going to talk about what is a yeast infection, okay? And we're going to focus on vaginal yeast infections today specifically. We're going to talk about what causes a yeast infection, and we're going to talk about what are the signs and symptoms so that you know what to look out for, and then I'm going to give you some all-natural protocols to help treat it. Sound good? I hope some of you are here, and I hope this is going to help you out, and I hope you're a little, I shouldn't say excited to talk about vaginal yeast infections, but let's face it, if you've dealt with this, you know how horrible this is, and you know what the problems are, and you know what it's like to not be able to get permanent solutions. So the exciting news should be is that I'm going to offer you some solutions today, okay? So let's get started. So I said part of the reason I'm going to be looking at some of my notes, so don't let that bother you. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything. So remember I said that the reason why I said that most women will deal with some type of vaginal yeast infection at some point in time in their life or another is because they're caused by a fungus called Candida albicans. So what is Candida albicans, and is it bad? Let's talk about that. Candida albicans is a common yeast found in the body. Okay, it's found in your colon. Having this in your body is not bad. Okay, I'm going to say that again because I want you to understand that. Having this candida or yeast in your body, it's normal. Okay, it's when different things happen to the amount of that you start having problems. All right, so here's a knowledge nugget for you. I give these in a lot of my videos. Here's your first one in this one. You need to understand that fungi in the correct balance with good bacteria in your body are helpful in the digestion and synthesis of vitamins and enzymes. Okay, so we need a certain amount of fungus in our body. Okay, that's good for us. But did you notice I said a certain amount? That's where the key is in being able to control this. There's normally the presence of what's called lactobacilli. It's a good bacteria. Normally you find that in your gut, and it can control candida by lowering the pH. And when we're talking about vaginal yeast infections, what that particular good bacteria does is it lowers the pH in the vagina, okay? And so that helps keep the fungus from getting out of control, okay? So when the amount of Candida albicans becomes larger than the good bacteria, the Candida overtakes the good bacteria in the body. So they can both coexist, but when the amount of the Candida becomes larger than the good bacteria, the lactobacillus, it can overtake it, and that leads to all sorts of problems, including vaginal yeast infections, okay? So that's pretty much what happens in from the scientific standpoint of what's going on and how that's being caused, right? So we talked about what is the yeast infection a little bit. So let's go a little more in depth and say, how do the numbers of lactobacilli in good bacteria, how do they get lowered in the body? Specifically, what is it that's happening that's lowering those numbers? Considering I just said, as if those numbers get lower and the fungus gets higher, that's when you develop the infection. So what's happening that's causing the good bacteria to be reduced? Well, there's really three main categories, and there's some very specifics under those categories I'm going to discuss with you, okay? The first one is the reduction of good bacteria in your digestive tract. I'm going to say this a few times. You're going to hear me say it here once. All of this starts in your gut. All kinds of health. You will hear me say that time and time again in a bunch of different videos because 80% of your immunity lies in your gut. And the balance ratio of good versus bad bacteria and fungi versus bacteria always starts in your gut, okay? So how is it that in the gut we get the reduction of good bacteria? So what are the things that we're either doing or happening to us that are causing that? The consumption of refined carbohydrates, alcohol, and caffeine. Those all trigger that to happen. And when I say caffeine, I'm talking about caffeine that's not found naturally in nature, like tea and coffee naturally have caffeine in them. I'm talking about consuming caffeine that's been added to a substance, okay? Large amounts of sugar. Guys, processed sugar is so bad for you. Just stay away from it for so many different reasons, but it's especially a trigger for this. And you'll be surprised, most of you probably, to find out there's large amounts of sugar in what's called healthy foods. So again, if we stay away from processed, we don't necessarily have to deal with that. But that's a big trigger. A lot of your healthy foods have a lot of sugar in them, or what's considered healthy foods. Mushrooms, okay? So let me explain this for a little bit. It's because it's a fungi. So just by eating it, you're going to increase the amount of fungus in your body. You're just going to. So be careful. There are mushrooms that are good for you, and mushrooms can be healthy in so many different ways. But we don't need to eat more of that than we're consuming other things that are balancing out good bacteria in our body, okay? So keep an eye on that. Sushi. I'm sure my husband's just cocked his head, rolling his eyes, going, what? I like sushi. And a lot of you out there may be thinking that too, but here's the thing. Here's the thing you have to be careful with when it comes to sushi. Sushi can introduce the infection of other parasitic organisms into your body. Why? Because it's raw food. So you're not killing off any of the bacterial organisms in it. So you just have to be careful when you're consuming that, know where you're getting it from, and probably be careful to not consume a large amount of it. And if you're someone who's dealing with chronic yeast infections, I would stay away from sushi for that reason, okay? Antibiotics. Why? Because they kill good gut bacteria. Always, always, always. They may kill the bad stuff, but they kill the good stuff along with it. Immunosuppressive drugs. So there's quite a few drugs that fall into that category, but if you're not sure what I'm talking about, chemotherapy drugs, steroids, synthetic estrogens. If you're taking estrogen supplements, ladies, it's synthetic. If a doctor is putting estrogen in your body, it's synthetic, okay? It can be a big cause of this. Mercury fillings in your teeth. Why? Because they produce the same effect that antibiotics do in your body. They lower the good bacteria. They kill off all the good bacteria, so the only thing that can replicate is the bad bacteria and fungus, right? Because there's no good bacteria there to kill off that fungus. So those all fall under the first category of how do we lower the number of lactobacilli, good bacteria in the gut. It's a reduction of good bacteria in the digestive tract, okay? The second main category is an upset in your internal pH. Why does this matter? Internal pH is going to bring what's called homeostasis into that part of the body, which means it's going to keep everything right where it should be. When that internal pH level starts either rising, going up, or going down, things start malfunctioning in your body. Okay, they don't function the way they should. So what are some things that can cause the internal pH to be off? Acid blocking medications, because they block the absorption of iron, vitamin B6, folate, zinc, which lowers digestive enzymes. Okay, acid blocking medication is exactly what it sounds like. For any of you who are taking, if you have acid reflux, almost all of those medications that are on the market, whether they're over-the-counter or prescription, cause this, okay? They block the absorption of all those minerals, right? And we also have a decreasing amount of HCl, which is hydrochloric acid, as we age, okay? So hydrochloric acid, as we age, decreases naturally. And with that, it can upset the internal pH in your body. Okay? So that was the second main category. The third main category of what can cause a lowering of the good bacteria in your gut is immune dysfunction. And a lot of people have that. That could be exposure to toxic metals. A lot of us get a varying amount of exposure to that throughout our lifetime, and some people more than others, depending on what you do for a living, where you go. Okay? Internal toxins from poor digestion. It's another thing that can cause immune dysfunction. Stress. Guys, how many of us are stressed, especially ladies? In today's society, there are so many women I talk to on a regular basis who are stressed because most of us, even if we have families, we're working or we have careers, and there's nothing wrong with that, and there are other things we're doing. But for women, we tend to internalize that and put a lot on our shoulders, and we carry a large amount of stress, which we don't need to, but that's a whole nother video another day. Stress can mess up your internal pH. And again, that throws off a lot of things. That can mess up the amount of good. It can kill off good bacteria in your gut. Okay? Which is why you see a lot of different side effects from stress. That's why they say stress kills, right? So those are the main ways that you're lowering the lactobacilli in the gut, or the good bacteria in the gut. Here's a knowledge nugget for you, okay? Another one of these that I want you to know. Fungus exists everywhere. Ladies, it's everywhere we go. We come in contact with it on things we touch, in the air we breathe, but mainly in what we eat. Okay? So it's all around you. You come in contact with it all the time. You're breathing it in. It's in things you touch. It's in a lot of the soil and ground around you. But the largest amount of fungus that we get into our body comes from what we eat. So there's another reason to really pay attention to what we're eating. Okay? When this fungi or the fungus overgrows, it becomes what's called parasitic, and it can take root in tissues in the mycelial form, and they colonize. So not only is it parasitic, meaning it's going to leech onto something and make that its food source, which it does in your body, but now it starts colonizing, which means it's replicating itself and building more and more and more. It's overtaking that area of the body. Alrighty? And the result is chronic inflammation. How many of you have heard of inflammation being the cause of so many different diseases nowadays? Why? Because it is. Okay? Whenever anything overtakes an area of your body like that, you're going to get chronic inflammation because it's going to be triggering your immune system to say something's wrong, I need help here. And when you have that chronic inflammation, it contributes to degenerative diseases and all kinds of health issues. Okay? So pretty much, if we narrow it down and boil it down, a yeast infection, after everything I've said that is happening, chronic inflammation is the result of it. But I've explained to you how you get that inflammation. So that's what we have to correct. Okay? Keep in mind, like I said earlier, the problem starts in the gut. It always starts in the gut. Okay? So these Candida albicans can start here. And you may be asking me then, why are you talking about the gut if we're talking about vaginal yeast infections? If it's going on there, how is it making its way down there? It's a good question if you're not quite familiar with how things work in the body. But these Candida albicans, it's going to start in the gut and they move through the bloodstream to other parts of the body. That's how it gets down there. That's how it gets into the reproductive area and the urinary area. It's moving through your bloodstream. Okay? So, like I said, today we're going to focus on vaginal yeast infections because yeast infections can happen in all different parts of your body, and they can happen to men and women. Okay? So, and ladies, we can pass these on to men too. So it's not just a problem that affects us, it can affect other people in our lives and around us. So, I mean, it's something we need to get under control. We need to find a way to not only treat it for now and have to deal with it later, but to eradicate it from our body. Anyway, can I get an amen? Anybody want to actually completely get rid of it and not have to deal with it anymore? Okay, I hope I'm getting thumbs up. I hope there are people giving me thumbs up on this and commenting because that should be the goal. And that's what I'm going to help you do. That's what we're going to go over today. And I'm going to help show you how you can do that. Choice is up to you, but I'm going to give you the options. All right? So what are the symptoms? Okay? What are the symptoms of a vaginal yeast infection? All right? I'm going to write these down for you so that you can see these. I'll do a little bit of writing today, but I want to write certain things down so you can remember them and you can go back and look at them, and as we're talking, you can reflect on them and think, is this maybe me? Does this apply to me? How many of these apply to me? All right? So symptoms. vaginal yeast infection. Number one, and probably the most familiar, is itching. Fungus make you itch. What can I say? It's just the way it works. A discharge. And ladies, this discharge is usually clumpy and white. All right? That's typically the color of the discharge. It's usually clumpy. A lot of times it's described as like a cottage cheese kind of consistency and texture. Right? You'll get redness and or swelling of the labia. And I'm sorry if it's hard to read my writing. I'm going to try to make it as legible as possible. Slight bleeding. That is a possibility, and that does happen. So don't let it scare you and think, oh, something's major is wrong. You will get slight bleeding from it. Again, why? Because there's a ton of inflammation in there. Okay? You've got inflamed tissue. Vaginal pain. You don't always have all of these or even some of these, but these all can be symptoms. And ladies, this can especially be true during sex. Okay? I mean, think about it. You have an issue where you have an area that's severely inflamed, and then there's activity, like the type of activity that's happening during sex in that area, it's going to be painful. Okay, so that can be a key to you kind of figuring out, oh, this might be what I have going on. Okay, pain when urinating. Possible. Actually, that happens quite frequently with women. And sometimes an unusual smell. Okay? Those are all symptoms that might mean, if you have those symptoms, it might mean you have a yeast infection. It's actually quite possible and almost probable, especially, like I said, you're not always going to have every single one of these, but you're normally going to have at least a few of them, if not more. And it's going to be a telltale sign you have a yeast infection going on. Now, if you're someone who's ever had a yeast infection, or maybe you're someone who gets chronic recurring yeast infections or infections down there, maybe you have gone to the doctor, your OBGYN, or just a doctor, and they've asked you, and they start talking to you about BV, or bacterial vaginosis. Have you ever had that happen? And they tell you, okay, well, it might be this, you might have this, you might not have a yeast infection. And how many of you if you've had that said to you, you're sitting there going, I have no idea what you're talking about. What does that mean? What is the difference between the two? Right? You're like, it's something going on down there. I don't know what the difference is. Is there a difference? I just want to get rid of it, right? I want to explain the difference really quick, because there is a difference technically in what's happening, but a lot of the symptoms are the same. And you're going to understand in a minute when I go more in depth and explain some stuff to you why I'm going to say we pretty much treat them the same way. Okay? So that you have an understanding of what's really going on. Because unfortunately, I don't think the current medical community does a good job of really explaining this properly to ladies. So let's break this down once and for all so we understand what's the difference between a vaginal yeast infection and bacterial vaginosis, or BV, as you'll hear it referred to. BV, we'll just shorten it, call it that, is caused by an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in the vagina. So it's not fungal in nature like a yeast infection is. A yeast infection is caused by fungus. BV is caused by an imbalance of good and bad bacteria. Okay? There's more bad bacteria than good. BV has no symptoms, okay, per se. But you might notice, it's possible to notice, and here are some of the things. You might notice itching. Okay, so I'm going to circle the ones they share in common. You might notice itching. A lot of times you do, especially if it's going on for a while. And it's going to make sense in a minute why, okay? So hang with me. I'm going to connect these two. But you might also notice a little burning. So what I'm writing in black, what I circle or write in black, that's with BV. What's in blue is with yeast, okay? So itching and possibly some burning. You might notice a distinctive odor. So an unusual smell, but it's going to be different. This odor is going to be a little fishy. Okay? So it's going to smell fishy. And the odor usually comes after sex, ladies, that fishy smell. Okay? BV is not only unpleasant, but it can increase the risk of PIV or pelvic inflammatory disease. It can also cause pregnancy complications and STDs. So it's not something to just look past and ignore. It can cause a lot of other problems in your body. Okay, now I'm going to connect the dots here between yeast infections and BV, all right? So we said it doesn't really have symptoms, but you could have some of this. And it's caused by an imbalance of good and bad bacteria in your vagina, right? Not fungus. So the basic difference is one is caused by fungus and the other bacteria, okay? Doctors will tell you can treat yeast infections with over-the-counter medications, topically or internally, right? Because if you have a yeast infection, you can go get Monostat 7, right? Or Monostat 1, or whatever it is, whether you just want to take a pill or you're doing it topically. Those are all over the counter, right? However, a BV, if a doctor diagnoses you with BV or bacterial vaginosis, that is treated topically, or I shouldn't say topically, with vaginal inserts or oral antibiotics that can only be given to you with a prescription medication, right? Because it's bacteria based. Now, I'm going to talk to you why I don't recommend over-the-counter medications or prescription medications for this, because you remember what we talked about and what one of the causes for affecting the balance of good and bacteria in your gut or in the vaginal area is? Antibiotics, right? So do you see what the problem would be is if you start taking antibiotics for a problem like this? Well, it may kill off the bad bacteria, but it's also going to kill off the good bacteria, right? Because we said that's a side effect of it. So what's going to happen is you're going to be taking the medication for this, and it may, in the short term, you may get rid of that infection, but that infection's only going to come back. It's just this cycle that keeps going. Take medicine, it goes away, comes back. Take medicine, go away, comes back. Take medicine, go away, it comes back. How many of you are dealing with that? How many of you is that your life and you are just frustrated, right? Raise your hand. And you know why I can say this? Because this happened to me for a point in time in my life. Before I could figure out what was going on, I was thinking, I'm a clean person. I'm not dirty. I don't understand. Been married for 20 years to the same man. I don't sleep. What's going on? Trying to figure out what is happening. And it was because, and I started, I took the over-counter, the OTC medications. I took the Monostat 7, the Monostat 1, the Monostat 3, whatever it was, and used that. And I was like, why am I in this cycle? And there were a few things that had happened that, and we'll go into in a minute, that I had done I didn't realize had upset the balance of my system. But also those medications were keeping me in that cycle, okay? This is why I'm going to recommend, and I only recommend all natural treatments for this, because there's nothing else that's going to help, because the things you introduce to your body that are supposed to help with it, that we're being told will help with it, they only continue the problem, okay? Does that make sense? All right, so here's a knowledge nugget for you, okay? I'm going to give you another knowledge nugget here. Yeast infections, here's how they work. They're dirty little smart monsters, okay? They work by burrowing deep under your skin or inside the body, okay? And they do that by using what's called fimbriae. They're like little tentacles. They attach to the epithelial cells. So it's like they grab onto them and they burrow deep inside your body. So if you're only using topical creams or ointments or treatments on the surface of the skin, you're missing a larger percentage of the yeast that multiplies deeper within your body. So if you're only doing topical, you're only getting what's on the outside. You are not getting all the stuff that's on the inside. And there's a much larger amount deep down inside because of the way they work. So in here, topical only does not cut off the life supply to yeast. I'm going to say that again. Topical only will not cut off the life supply to these infections. You have to treat it topically and internally. It's the only way to do it, okay? Yeast infections tend to, and it's worth noting this and to know this, they tend to occur in areas of the body where the yeast can reproduce easily, okay? In moist environments. In areas such as the mouth and the throat, the genitals, armpits, believe it or not, again, we have sweat glands down there, so that's another area. The anal area, I know it sounds weird and kind of gross, but it can happen there. The belly button, again, get a little closed off cavity where you can sweat and there's not a lot of ability for moisture to escape. So it can be a prime area for that. The nasal cavity, within your ears, fingernails, toenails, and you've seen that, and you've seen pictures or maybe know of people or yourself have dealt with that. In between the fingers and the toes, and your digestive tract. So those are all places where yeast tends to grow and where it's the most favorable environment for it. Ready? So here's something else I want to write down. I'm going to take this off and I'm going to write this down. And this is going to be, your odds of developing a yeast infection are highest in these circumstances and situations. So I want to write them down so you can take note of them, okay? These are the situations and circumstances where yeast, the odds of developing a yeast infection are the highest, okay? So following antibiotics. So after you've gone through a round of antibiotics, and we talked about why earlier. So if you are on or were on antibiotics right after. If you're on birth control, ladies, this is a doozy for me. There are so many things I will tell you about birth control, so many issues I have with birth control, but I will tell you just briefly, really quick, this right here was the number one thing that caused the very first yeast infection I ever had, and it started a cycle for me for a few years until I learned how to break it naturally. Why? Because it jacks up your hormones, and then your hormones start shooting off at different levels they shouldn't be. Birth control. If you're having a lot of yeast infections, I would encourage you to find another way for contraception, but not birth control, okay? Something else that could be a time where you'll see it, or it's a favorable time for it, would be during pregnancy. And you may be asking, why? Why is that? Well, remember what I just said the reason was for why birth control caused it? Hormone levels are all over the place. Same thing here. That's why. It messes up the pH in different levels when your hormones are all over the place. Another thing, again, hormonal imbalance. So you're seeing how these things are linked, right? At least these three right here are all linked together because these are caused by hormonal imbalance. Alrighty? After sex. That can be a prime time too for an infection to start or for yeast to grow over. So it's always a good idea, ladies, to clean ourselves after sex. Definitely within 24 hours. If you can immediately, if not, within 24 hours. In an all-natural way to just flush yourself out. And I'm not talking douches. I'm not a big fan of douches and what's in them and what they do because they don't properly, with the ingredients are in them and what they're doing, they don't help reset your pH and bring your body back into homeostasis. They actually mess that level up. Even more if it already is. So again, I'll give you recommendations and stuff, and I'm going to have a link that has recommendations for very specific things I recommend that you do that you can click on after this video is done. But I don't recommend going to your store. Go into the store and buying a douche that's on the market. They just, for so many reasons, I just don't have time to get into in this video. That would not be a recommendation, okay? But you do need to clean yourself. And like I said, I'll give recommendations on how in the link. All right, so let's keep going. What's another time where it's conducive to, where the odds of developing a yeast infection are the highest, okay? Let's see. Having an impaired immune system. Okay, so if you have something going on, some disease or illness, you have an impaired immune system. And so during that time, you're going to be more susceptible to the amount of bad bacteria overtaking good bacteria, which that may already be going on because of whatever you're dealing with, and it can trigger a yeast infection from it. Okay. Diabetes. This is a big one. If you suffer from type 2 diabetes, you are highly, highly vulnerable to yeast infections because for somebody, again, without getting into the science behind it, you have a lot higher number of bad bacteria than good bacteria, okay? Due to glucose levels and stuff being off in your body. So highly susceptible if you're a diabetic to this. And then poor hygiene. And by this, I don't mean you don't shower, which hopefully that's not true about any of you. You don't shower on a regular basis, but you know, poor hygiene, not when that would be if you don't shower regularly, or if you do, making sure you clean those areas out properly. Wearing dirty, damp clothes. Ladies, this can be a problem for us during the summer. If we're in our swimsuits a lot, we're walk around, and after we swim, we keep them on, and we keep them on for hours afterwards. Think about it. If you're in a lake, if you're in a pool, for the most part, you're pretty clean, especially because most of them are chlorinated, and so it kills all that. But even so, remember we said the conducive environment for yeast growing is a moist, closed-off environment where it can't breathe. Well, if your skin is damp and what you're wearing is wet and it's closed off, even if you're in a pool, you're creating an environment for yeast to breed, and for yeast to breed in a larger amount and overtake any good bacteria. But especially if you're in an ocean or you're in a lake, because there's all kinds of protozoans and bacteria in there, and now you've given them a moist environment. You just created the perfect environment for them. So ladies, after you go swimming, or you've had a day out, if you're at the beach or in the pool or on the lake, as soon as you're done, come on, take off your swimsuit, rinse off real quick, and put on dry, clean clothes. Get dry and put on dry, clean clothes. Do not sit around in your wet swimsuit. It's never a good idea, okay? So, we've talked about what a yeast infection is, the difference between a yeast infection and bacterial vaginosis, what causes that. We've also talked about signs and symptoms, and then we just talked about what are some of the most conducive times to a yeast infection taking place. Now let's talk about, so we've learned about all that. So now, hopefully you have a better understanding of, do I have a yeast infection? And if you go, yep, I know that's me. Well, why has this been happening? You understand that. So now let's talk about, okay, I know that's me. So what can I do about it, right? That's what you want to know now. What can I do about this to not only correct it now, but to correct the situation so it doesn't keep happening, right? How do I end the cycle of this? That's what we're going to talk about. Yay, right? This is the exciting time. So here we go. So how do you properly treat or cure a yeast infection or a BV infection? Because remember I said we're going to treat them the same. Because guys, science tells me, based off everything we've talked about, everything I've told you and what I know, that bacterial vaginosis is a precursor to a yeast infection. I would say that everyone who has a yeast infection almost always started off as bacterial vaginosis, because of what you learned about the two earlier. So they go hand in hand. And if you have bacterial vaginosis and it hasn't turned into a yeast infection yet, if you get that under control and eradicate that, you won't develop a yeast infection. So that's why we're gonna treat them both the same, because pretty much we're gonna take an all-natural approach. The only different specific things I'll recommend that you'll see in the link is if it's a yeast infection, there are some specific ingredients I'm gonna recommend you use because they're antifungal, not just antibacterial. But other than that, the rest will be the same. All right, are you ready? Okay, first thing, keep your skin clean and dry. We just talked about that, right? Keep your skin clean and dry. It's one of the best things you can do for that. That doesn't mean you can't go to the gym and sweat, or be outside working out and sweat. It doesn't mean you can't do that. What I'm saying is, don't let it go on for long periods of time, or even after you work out, especially too at the gym. Don't stay in those gym clothes that you sweat in and all that was in there, and those tend to be tight, because our workout clothes are tighter, so parts aren't moving around that don't need to be. Don't wear those for hours afterwards. When you're done, take them off, clean your body off, okay? 2, wear clean clothes and underwear. Also wear looser fitting clothes and avoid tights and stockings. Ladies, that's popular these days. The tights and the stockings. And the popularity from means what we're seeing is they're not tights just aren't being worn to the gym or to work out. They're being worn as people's everyday clothes. I don't quite understand that myself, but some people like that. You know, it's up to you. However you want to dress, it's up to you. But if you are dealing with chronic yeast infections or bacterial vaginosis, you got to cut it out because it's part of the problem, okay? Because there's no air able to move through there and you're trapping stuff in there. I would get rid of that, okay? For underwear, ladies, I recommend whether you're dealing with this problem or not, in order to keep from having to deal with yeast infection or BV, recommend cotton crotch line panties. So in the crotch of the panties, whether it's full panties, full coverage, or it's a thong, make sure it's cotton in the lining there, okay? Because it just breathes better than any of the other material. Third thing I would say is add the proper nutrients to your diet. It's so key for so many things in our life, and it's key for this too. I have a recommendation for specific vitamins that I recommend that'll be in the link, just because if you've heard me talk in any other videos, the Lifelong Vitality Pack is what I recommend from doTERRA, and because they give you the proper amount of what you need. It's source non-GMO, it's source clean. They pair it with oils and enzymes and things that you need in order for your body to properly absorb the nutrients in there. It's just all around the best I've seen on the market, okay? But you've got to add proper nutrients to your diet. And most of us, and that means for almost the large majority of us, 95% of us, we have to supplement, if not 100%, especially in this country, okay? Fourth thing, add probiotics to your daily routine, okay? We don't have time to go into probiotics, what they are. I'll do that in another video for you, but you need them, okay? Because again, probiotics are going to help put the good bacteria in your gut where it needs to be. And remember, we said that's where it starts. So you need it. It crowds out Candida when you have the good bacteria, right? It crowds it out, which means it's not allowed to proliferate or colonize, right? Fifth thing, balance your hormones. Ladies, hormones tend to be key to so many things that we're dealing with, or so many of the symptoms or diseases or issues we end up dealing with a lot of times can be tied back to our hormones. We have to properly balance our hormones, alrighty? So again, I'm gonna say it again, I can't say enough times. My recommendation, get off birth control. It does more harm than it does good. It does so much to your body that is gonna leave you trying to spend time having to correct it. Find another way for contraceptives. There's other things out there. Birth control, from a physiological health standpoint, it's probably one of the worst things you can do, okay? There are some recommendations I recommend for you. There's something called the Women's Phytoestrogen Complex that doTERRA puts out as well. It's really good for naturally putting things in your body that help balance out your hormones and keep you level and stable. And it's natural, so it's causing your body to trigger it. It's not putting any xenoestrogens or synthetic estrogens in your body. Your body produces what it needs and balances you out. It's great. And get rid of the xenoestrogen exposure. What do I mean by xeno? I mean false estrogen. It means it makes your body think it's estrogen when it's not. Okay? And there's so many xenoestrogens in a lot of the products we use, whether it be there's xenoestrogens in the body lotions we use, our shampoos, our face washes out there. Excuse me, I have the hiccups. I'll do another video on that and talk to you about what's in that, how to get rid of it, and where to go to find natural stuff. But the more xenoestrogens you can cut out of what you're putting into your body, the better off you're going to be. Ready? Number 6, cut processed sugar out of your diet. It has to go. It doesn't need to be in our diet for so many different reasons, not just this, but this is a big factor because sugar, yeast feeds on sugar. You got to get rid of it, okay? Processed sugar, hear me on that, okay? I know there's sugar in fruit. I hear so many people say that, but when you say that, you don't properly understand botany. The sugar that's in fruit is good sugar and your body is able to process it for so many different reasons. That's not the sugar I'm talking about. I'm talking about processed sugar, okay? 7th thing. You're going to fight it topically and you're going to fight it internally. And part of that protocol is going to include certified pure therapeutic grade essential oils. Okay? You have to get the best stuff out there and the right stuff. And with that right protocol and everything else we've talked about, it's going to help your body naturally correct the situation. Not just for this one time, but once and for all. If you make this part of your routine, okay? You would be taking an oil pill internally as well as using a combination of a vaginal insert. And so where you're going to find this information as far as what to do and the recipes and how to do it, it's going to be in a link. So if you want to find that link, to the right of the title of the video, to the right of, or down below the video, you're going to see an arrow. Click on that arrow. It's going to pull up the description, and in that description, you'll see a link. You can click on the link, and that's where you'll get all the details of the information, what I said you need, and what you'll need, and you can go there. Also, if you'll look to the right of me, you can click a button there and subscribe. If you like this channel, you like the videos, and you want to see more, and you want to know what's coming next, go ahead and subscribe. And to the left of me, if you haven't checked out the latest video, go ahead and check that out. And at the time you're watching this, I don't know if there's going to be a new video or not, but you can either see the last video or the next video that's coming to the left of me. So I hope you've enjoyed this. Ladies, I hope this helped. If you have any questions, let me know in the comment section. If there are things you want me to discuss more, something else you'd like me to go over, if I can, I definitely will, but you have to let me know. If you like this, give me a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe so you can see what's coming in the future. Ladies, I hope this helped. Happy day to you. I hope everything gets better, and I hope if you've been dealing with this, your life starts to get better. And ladies, here's something I want you to remember, okay? That our bodies are very complicated machines, so they require meticulous maintenance, all right? Intelligent design requires meticulous maintenance. I'll see you next time.